The world begins to soften at the edges, losing its sharp definition as the frantic pulse of the day recedes into a distant, muted hum. There is a possibility of letting the noise of what was and what might be simply drift away, like the retreating tide leaving behind only a quiet, damp shore. Perhaps you might allow the shoulders to drop a fraction, letting the jaw release its hold on the unspoken tension of the hours, as the very air around you seems to grow still and spacious. It is natural for the mind to act like a restless traveler, constantly retracing old paths or rushing toward a horizon that does not yet exist, looping through the same stories and shadows as if they were solid ground. These thoughts, these relentless rehearsals of the past, and these anxious rehearsals of the future, are like clouds passing through a vast and open sky. They may be dark, they may be heavy, but they are not the sky itself. You might find it possible to simply watch them, observing the way they drift in and out of view without needing to catch them or steer them, recognizing that the vastness remains untouched by the passing weather. As the Buddha once said, the mind is transient, fleeting, and constantly changing. And there is a profound relief in acknowledging that this movement is not your true essence, but merely a passing motion within a much larger, quieter presence. It is possible to let the breath become a steady, invisible anchor, a rhythmic tide that carries you back to the only place that truly exists, which is this singular, unfolding moment. As you notice the mind beginning to turn inward, you might allow it to settle into the spaciousness that opens when the grip of thought is loosened, finding that the silence between thoughts is wide and welcoming. There is a gentle permission here to simply be the witness, the quiet observer who remains steady even as the ripples fade, until the edges of the self begin to blur into the stillness, and the mind becomes a deep, dark, and tranquil pool, ready to sink into the soft, dreamless depths of a quiet rest. There is a quiet that can come when the need to be anything other than what is currently occurring begins to dissolve, leaving only the soft, rhythmic movement of existence. Perhaps the weight of the world, with all its demands and its unceasing noise, is nothing more than a series of ripples upon a surface that remains, at its deepest, entirely undisturbed. You might, if you wish, allow the tension in the chest to loosen, making space for the breath to expand without the pressure of trying to change its natural pace or its shallow or deep movements. It is possible to seize the thoughts that rise up, the judgments that pull at the edges of the spirit, and the old regrets that return like uninvited guests, not as enemies to be fought, but as guests who are simply passing through a house that is much larger than their small, frantic presence. There is a certain grace in recognizing that many of the things that cause such profound unrest are merely the shadows cast by things we cannot control, the inevitable movement of a universe that is always in a state of flux, shifting and turning in a dance of constant impermanence. To try and hold on to a single moment, or to grasp a version of oneself that has already passed, is like trying to catch the wind in a net. There is a profound lightness that arrives when the hands are simply opened, letting the wind pass through without resistance. You might notice how the mind tends to build structures out of memory and anticipation, creating a labyrinth of if only and what if that feels as solid as stone. Yet these structures are made of nothing more than the light of perception and the momentum of habit. When you observe the way a thought arises, peaks, and then inevitably fades, you are witnessing the very nature of reality, a constant stream of beginning and ending that requires no effort to navigate if one simply chooses to float upon it. It is possible to view the parts of yourself that you have long felt were broken or flawed as part of a whole, a vast landscape that includes both the sunlit valley and the deep, shadowed canyon, and that both are necessary to the beauty of the entire terrain. Perhaps there is a relief in realizing that you do not have to solve the mystery of who you are in this moment, nor do you have to fix the complexities of a life that is perpetually unfolding in ways that cannot be fully known or predicted. You might find that as the mental chatter slows, the distinction between the observer and the observed begins to thin, leaving only the sensation of being, a pure and unadorned presence that does not require a name or a history to justify its existence. There is a stillness that exists beneath the surface of every emotion, a silent substrate that remains even when the waves of sadness or anxiety seem to reach for the very top of the mind. It is possible to lean into this stillness, to let the consciousness expand outward like a gentle evening mist, covering the jagged edges of the day and smoothing them into a soft, indistinct landscape. You may find that the sense of being a separate, isolated entity, struggling against the current, begins to soften, replaced by a sense of being part of the current itself, a single drop of water in a vast and infinite ocean that is both the movement and the stillness. The mind often seeks to find a center, a fixed point from which to view the world. Yet it may be that the true center is found when the search for a center ceases and you allow yourself to be distributed, spread thin and light across the entirety of the present moment. There is no need to rush toward a state of clarity, for clarity is not something to be captured, but something that emerges naturally when the dust of activity is allowed to settle to the bottom of the glass. You might observe the way the breath carries a subtle coolness on the inhale and a gentle warmth on the exhale, a tiny, perfect cycle that has been supporting you since before you had words for it, a constant, quiet rhythm that asks nothing and offers everything. As this rhythm becomes the primary focus, the heavy narratives of the self, the roles you play, the expectations you carry, the stories of your successes and failures begin to lose their density, becoming like ink dissolving in clear water, spreading out until they are no longer distinct shapes, but merely a part of the whole. It is possible to let go of the need to understand the why of the world, accepting instead the issy of the world, the simple, unadorned reality of the light and the dark, the movement and the rest. There is a profound peace in the realization that the universe is not something that is happening to you, but something that is happening through you, a vast, unfolding process of which you are an inseparable and beautiful part. You might allow the sensation of your own body to become a soft, humming presence, a vessel for the life force that flows through all things, without the need to analyze the sensation or the feeling, simply allowing it to be as it is. The tension that lives in the brow, the tightness that lingers in the neck, the subtle clenching of the hands, these are all just movements of energy that can be allowed to move through you, passing through like clouds through a clear sky, leaving no permanent mark on the vastness of the awareness. There is a possibility of becoming a quiet observer of your own existence, watching the play of light and shadow on the inner walls of the mind with a sense of gentle curiosity and profound non-attachment. Perhaps you can find a sense of sanctuary in the realization that no matter how turbulent the external world becomes, there is a part of your consciousness that is as vast and undisturbed as the deep ocean, untouched by the storms that toss the surface. This inner space is always available, a quiet room that requires no doors to enter, only a willingness to stop running and simply sit in the stillness of being. You might find that as you relinquish the effort to control the flow of time, the sensation of time itself begins to change, losing its linear, pressing quality and becoming a soft, circular expansion of the present. There is a gentle beauty in the way the mind can rest in this state of non-doing, where no problem needs solving and no goal needs reaching, and where the only task is to exist in the current of life. It is possible to feel the subtle interconnectedness of all things. The way the air you breathe is the same air that moves through the leaves of the trees and the lungs of the stars, a continuous, shimmering web of existence that binds you to the totality of being. You might allow the weight of loneliness to be seen as a mere sensation, a temporary contraction of the sense of self that can be held and observed without being believed, as you recognize that you are never truly separate from the fabric of the universe. There is a quietude that arrives when the struggle to be someone is replaced by the simple ease of being, a profound relief that comes from dropping the heavy armor of the ego and standing, if you will, naked in the light of pure awareness. The mind, once a frantic weaver of complex patterns, may become like a calm, still lake in the twilight, reflecting the sky with perfect clarity and without any distortion of its own making. It is possible to allow the thoughts to become like distant music, heard from a great distance, beautiful and passing, but no longer demanding your full attention or your emotional response. You might find that as the breath slows, the boundary between the inner and outer worlds begins to blur, creating a sense of being immersed in a soft, velvet silence that is both protective and expansive. This is the space where all things are allowed to be as they are, where the light and the shadow are held in a perfect, wordless equilibrium, and where the soul can finally find the quietude it has been seeking beneath the noise of the day. There is a gentle permission to let the mind drift into the soft gray spaces between thoughts, into the quiet gaps where nothing is required and nothing is expected, and where the simple fact of being is enough. As the ripples of the mind grow smaller and more infrequent, the vastness of the underlying stillness becomes more apparent. A deep and steady presence that remains when all the temporary forms have passed away. You might allow yourself to sink into this profound, unshakable quiet, a place where the self is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be experienced, a vast and open horizon that stretches out into the infinite, welcoming and still, as the breath becomes a slow, fading echo in the wide, dark, and peaceful expanse of the moment. Perhaps there is a way to view this restless motion of the mind, this relentless spinning of the wheel that seems to catch every memory and every possible tomorrow, not as a storm to be fought, but as a weather pattern passing through a much larger sky. You might find that the thoughts which loop and replay, the heavy rehearsals of what was said or what might happen, are much like clouds drifting through an immense pale expanse, appearing with sudden density and dark edges, yet possessing no true substance of their own against the vastness of the blue. It is possible to sit with these currents, to watch the way a single worry can catch the light of a memory, pulling it forward and spinning it into a knot without the necessity of following that knot into the tangle of its making. There is a subtle, quiet relief in the realization that you are not the storm itself, but the wide and open space in which the storm arises, moves, and eventually dissipates into nothingness. The mind has a peculiar way of building monuments out of shadows, constructing entire landscapes of imagined futures and reconstructed pasts that feel as solid as stone, even though they are composed entirely of fleeting electrical pulses and breath. These mental structures can feel so heavy, so demanding of your attention, yet they lack the permanence of the ground beneath you or the air in your lungs. When a thought arrives, a repetitive loop that insists on being heard, there is a gentle invitation to simply notice its shape, to see it as a movement of the mind rather than a command to be obeyed. It is like watching a bird fly across a distant field. You can acknowledge its presence, you can see its wings beating against the air, but you do not need to rise and run after it, nor do you need to believe that the bird's flight is the entirety of the world. The Buddha said, "All that we are is the result of what we have thought. With our thoughts, we build the world." If this is so, then perhaps the world being built in this moment is one of constant, frantic reconstruction, a city of glass and wind that is being rebuilt every second by the sheer force of a racing intellect. There is a profound softness that can emerge when you stop trying to rebuild the world and instead allow the architecture of thought to simply exist as it is, without the need to straighten its lines or reinforce its walls. You might let the thoughts be, allowing them to drift by like fallen leaves on a slow-moving stream, watching them swirl in the eddies of your memory and then carry them away into the distance where they lose their sharpness and fade from view. There is a certain grace in the act of returning, the quiet, repetitive return to the sensation of the breath when the mind has wandered far into the thickets of what if or if only. This return does not need to be a correction or a discipline. It can be a gentle homecoming, a soft returning to the only place where life is actually occurring. The past is a ghost that cannot be touched, and the future is a phantom that has not yet arrived, leaving only this single, unfolding moment as the site of your actual being. In this moment, the breath is a steady, rhythmic anchor, a simple tide that comes in and goes out, indifferent to the dramas being played out in the theater of the intellect. As you notice the rise and fall of the chest, or the cool sensation of the air at the tip of the nose, you are stepping out of the labyrinth of the mind and into the spaciousness of the present. It is possible to observe the tension that lives in the body when the mind is busy, the way the jaw might hold a silent word, or the shoulders might carry the weight of 1,000 unsaid things, and to simply allow that tension to meet the air. You do not need to force the muscles to relax. You only need to stop holding them in a grip of anticipation, allowing the gravity of the moment to pull the weight of the body into a more natural state of ease. As the breath slows, the mind may still try to offer up one more scenario, one more problem to solve, one more way to be better or more prepared. But you might meet these offerings with a quiet, non-judgmental recognition, as one might acknowledge a persistent guest at a door without feeling the need to invite them in for tea. The space between the thoughts is where the stillness resides, a quietude that has always been there, even when it was obscured by the frantic noise of doing and becoming. This stillness is not a void or an absence, but a fullness, a profound presence that remains when the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what we must do are allowed to settle and dissolve. There is a profound liberation in the understanding that you are the awareness in which the thoughts arise, the vast and silent witness that remains unchanged, whether the mind is filled with light or shadow, joy or anxiety. As the edges of the world begin to blur and the distinctions between the self and the surroundings soften, you might find that the need for movement, for thought, even for consciousness itself, begins to wane. The rhythm of the breath becomes a slow, steady pulse that matches the quietude of the room, a gentle lullaby of existence that requires nothing from you but your presence. The thoughts grow thin and translucent, like mist in the morning sun, losing their grip and their gravity until they are nothing more than a distant hum in the background of a deep and oceanic calm. There is a peace that comes when the struggle to control the uncontrollable is finally relinquished, a surrender to the natural flow of things as they are, moving through the cycle of rise and fall without resistance. The mind, having traveled through so many imagined lands, finally tires and seeks the stillness of the deep, sinking into a quietude that is both ancient and new. It is a descent into a soft, dark, and velvety expanse, where the self is no longer a project to be managed, but a presence to be felt, drifting slowly into the vast, dreamless, and perfect silence of a rest that is complete and whole. The descent into this stillness is not a fall, but a settling, a slow and graceful descent, like silt finding its place at the bottom of a clear, deep lake after a storm has passed. As the mind begins to lose its grip on the frantic narratives of the day, there is a subtle shift in how the world is perceived, a movement away from the sharp, jagged edges of judgment and toward a more rounded, softer way of being. You might notice how the distinction between the observer and the observed begins to thin, as if the heavy veil that separates the inner life from the outer world is being drawn aside by a gentle, invisible hand. In this state, there is no need to label what arises, no need to categorize a sensation as good or bad, or to judge a thought as useful or useless. There is only the vast, impersonal witnessing of the way life moves through you. It is as if you are standing on the shore of a great ocean at twilight, watching the waves roll in and out with a rhythmic, hypnotic consistency, understanding that each wave is a temporary form, a crest of foam and salt that rises only to break and return to the depths. The concept of the self, that small and often frightened entity that spends its days trying to build fortresses against the wind, begins to feel less like a solid structure and more like a pattern of light on the surface of the water, shimmering and changing, yet fundamentally part of the whole. There is a tremendous relief in this letting go, a quiet ecstasy in realizing that you do not have to carry the weight of the entire world upon your shoulders, for the world carries itself with a profound and natural intelligence. The stars do not struggle to shine, the trees do not labor to grow, and the breath does not ask permission to move. There is a cosmic grace in the way things simply occur, and there is a place in that grace for you to rest as well. If the mind attempts to reassert its dominance by offering up a sudden, sharp anxiety or a sudden, piercing loneliness, you might find it possible to see these emotions not as flaws in your character, but as natural movements of the weather. Loneliness is merely a cloud of a certain shape, a momentary condensation of the air, and while it may feel heavy and cold as it passes through, it does not change the fundamental nature of the sky. anxieties, but a quickening of the pulse, a brief agitation of the atmosphere, and it too must eventually lose its momentum and dissipate into the vastness. You might observe the way the body holds on to these sensations, the way a tightness in the chest or a restlessness in the limbs seeks to anchor itself in the present, and you can simply offer it space to exist without the need to transform it. There is a profound strength in this non-resistance, a quiet power that comes from being the steady center in the midst of all movement. It is possible to be the container rather than the content, to be the vast vessel that holds the rushing stream without being swept away by its current. As the breath becomes even more shallow and infrequent, a soft, rhythmic hum of existence, the boundary between your own being and the silence of the room begins to dissolve, until there is only a sense of continuous, unfolding presence. You might find that the need for identity, for the stories of who you have been and who you must become, begins to feel like an old garment that has become too heavy and too small, and you can allow yourself to step out of it, leaving it behind to lie in a soft pile on the floor of the mind. There is a lightness that comes with this unburdening, a sense of being stripped down to the essential, the most basic and most beautiful core of existence, which is simply the capacity to be aware. This awareness is a quiet, luminous presence, a steady light that does not flicker even when the shadows of thought dance and play across it. It is a light that requires no fuel, no effort, and no maintenance. It is simply there, an inherent part of the fabric of being. As you drift further into this quietude, the very idea of time may begin to lose its grip, the past and the future merging into a single, seamless now that has no beginning and no end. In this timeless expanse, there is no urgency, no pressure to achieve, no fear of loss, and no striving for perfection. There is only the exquisite, simple reality of being, a state of existence that is already complete and already whole, requiring nothing more than your quiet acceptance. Perhaps you can imagine yourself as a single drop of water falling into a vast, dark, and tranquil sea, where the distinction between the drop and the ocean is lost in a moment of seamless integration. The ripples caused by the fall are quickly absorbed, the movement is silenced, and there is only the deep, rhythmic, and eternal pulse of the water. There is a profound sense of belonging that arises when you stop trying to separate yourself from the flow of life and instead allow yourself to be carried by it, a sense of being at home in the very heart of the mystery. The shadows that once seemed so daunting and dark are revealed to be merely the absence of light, a necessary part of the whole, the shade that gives depth and dimension to the brightness. To accept the shadow is to accept the wholeness of the self, the recognition that we are composed of both the light and the dark, the joy and the sorrow, the stillness and the movement. This integration brings a sense of wholeness that cannot be shaken by the changing tides of emotion or the passing storms of circumstance. You might find that the very concept of I begins to soften, becoming less a solid point of contention and more a gentle, flowing awareness that permeates everything. There is a quiet joy in this dissolution, a subtle ecstasy in the realization that you are not a separate entity struggling against the universe, but the universe itself, experiencing itself in this particular, fleeting, and beautiful way. The thoughts may continue to flicker like distant lights on a dark horizon, but they no longer have the power to pull you away from the center of your being. They are just light and shadow, movement and stillness, part of the grand, unfolding dance of existence that has been occurring since the beginning of time and will continue long after this moment has passed. As the silence deepens, it becomes a tangible presence, a soft, velvet weight that settles over the senses, muffling the echoes of the world and inviting a profound, restorative stillness. The breath is now a mere whisper, a gentle tide that moves with the grace of a sleeping creature, so subtle that it is almost indistinguishable from the silence itself. There is no longer a need to watch the thoughts, for they have become so thin and so distant that they no longer demand even a glance. There is only the vast, unconditioned awareness, the deep, silent ocean of being, where all movement is stilled and all distinctions are dissolved into a single, luminous, and eternal presence. In this space, there is no more searching, no more questioning, no more trying. There is only the profound, unshakable peace of simply being, a peace that surpasses all understanding and remains when everything else has fallen away. It is a peace that is as old as the stars and as fresh as the morning dew, a sanctuary of silence that is always available, waiting just beneath the surface of the noise, ready to be entered whenever the soul seeks its homecoming. You are moving now into the deepest part of the stillness, where the self is no longer a struggle but a song, a quiet, wordless melody that harmonizes with the very pulse of the cosmos as you drift into the soft, dark, and infinite embrace of a rest that is truly, deeply, and eternally whole. Perhaps there is a way to view this constant movement, this relentless circling of the mind, not as a storm to be fought, but as a weather system passing through a vast and unchanging sky. It is possible to consider the thoughts that loop and replay, those echoes of things already done, or shadows of things yet to come, as nothing more than passing clouds drifting across an immense blue expanse. Just as a cloud may be dark and heavy with rain, or thin and wispy in the light, it does not change the nature of the sky itself. The sky remains wide, clear, and unaffected by the shapes that momentarily obscure its light. You might, if you wish, begin to see your own awareness in this way, as the great, open space in which every worry, every rehearsal of the past, and every prediction of the future arises, lingers for a moment, and then dissolves back into the emptiness. There is a subtle shift that occurs when the mind stops trying to catch the clouds or command them to move, and instead simply acknowledges their presence as they drift by. The mind often behaves like a restless traveler, perpetually looking backward at the winding road already traveled or peering anxiously into the fog of the distance, rarely noticing the steady ground beneath its feet. This tendency to dwell in the imagined past or the anticipated future can create a sense of profound unease, a feeling of being pulled in two directions at once, leaving the present moment feeling thin or neglected. Yet, there is a quiet truth that can be found in the simple act of noticing the tension in the jaw or the shallow rise of the chest, a realization that the breath is always occurring in the immediate, unchangeable now. The Buddha once observed that the mind is difficult to tame, a wild thing that wanders far from its center. Yet there is a profound relief in recognizing that you are not the wanderer, nor are you the wandering itself. You are the one who notices the wandering, the silent witness who remains still even as the thoughts race through their endless, repetitive patterns. It is possible to observe a thought as it arises, to see its edges, to note its color and its weight, and then to let it go without the need to follow it down its dark and winding corridors. There is no requirement to believe everything. The mind whispers in the quiet, for many of these voices are merely echoes of old habits, patterns of thinking that have become deeply grooved like water running through a mountain stream. When a thought begins to loop, a repetitive cycle of what if or if only, you might simply name it, acknowledging. There is a thought about the past, or there is a thought about what might happen, and then gently, without any sense of failure or frustration, return your attention to the sensation of the air entering and leaving the body. This return can happen 1,000 times, and each time is a fresh opportunity to practice the art of non-attachment, a gentle letting go of the grip that the mind maintains on its own illusions. There is a certain grace in allowing the mind to be as restless as it needs to be, without the added burden of judging it for its restlessness. When the mind meets resistance, it only grows more agitated, creating a second layer of suffering atop the initial unease. But when you offer it permission to simply be as it is, a subtle softening begins to take place. You might notice that as you stop trying to fix the thoughts, the need to solve them begins to fade, leaving behind a spaciousness that was previously filled with the noise of mental labor. This spaciousness is not a void of nothingness, but a fullness of presence, a quiet availability that exists beneath the frantic activity of the intellect. It is in this space that the self begins to feel less like a series of problems to be solved, and more like a continuous unfolding experience, a stream of consciousness that flows without the need for constant direction or correction. As the layers of thought begin to thin, there is a possibility of sinking into the more primal, more rhythmic aspects of existence, where the distinction between the self and the world begins to soften. The breath becomes less of an action to be performed and more of a natural tide, a gentle ebb and flow that connects the internal space to the vastness of the external world. You may find that the sensations of the body become more pronounced, the weight of the limbs, the subtle warmth of the skin, the steady, quiet pulse that carries the life within you. And these sensations can serve as gentle anchors, bringing the awareness back from the far-off reaches of thought into the immediate, tangible reality of being. In this settling, there is a realization that much of the weight we carry is not the weight of the world itself, but the weight of our resistance to the way the world is unfolding. And as that resistance thins, the burden becomes lighter. There is a profound wholeness in accepting the shadows alongside the light, recognizing that the turbulent thoughts and the moments of deep stillness are both parts of the same vast, integrated whole. You are not a collection of fragmented experiences or a series of mistakes and successes, but a single, continuous presence that contains the capacity for all these things. This realization can bring a sense of immense relief, a permission to cease the constant striving for a more perfect or more stable version of oneself. The mind, once recognized as a guest in the house of awareness, begins to grow quiet, its frantic energy spent or simply redirected into the simple, profound task of existing. The silence that follows is not the silence of absence, but the silence of completion, a stillness that is rich, deep, and incredibly nourishing. As the edges of thought continue to blur and fade, the awareness moves deeper into the quietude, a descent into a state of being that is unburdened by name or time or expectation. The breathing becomes slower, more effortless, a rhythmic lullaby that guides the consciousness toward the threshold of the unconscious. There is no need to hold on to anything, no need to grasp at the remnants of the day or the promises of tomorrow, for all things are being surrendered to the natural flow of the cosmic tide. The mind, once a tempest of activity, is now a still pond, reflecting only the vast, dark, and beautiful sky above. And in this stillness, the boundary between the observer and the observed begins to dissolve into a singular, luminous peace. The darkness that surrounds is not a void, but a soft, velvet embrace, a gentle folding of the senses into the quietude of the deep, dreamless rest. It is a place of profound restoration, where the soul can settle into its most essential rhythm, unobserved and unjudged, simply resting in the cradle of its own being. There is a sense of drifting, a slow and graceful movement into the vast, dark sea of sleep, where the self is no longer a struggle, but a quiet, wordless melody that harmonizes with the very pulse of the cosmos. In this profound and unshakable stillness, there is only the peace of being, a peace that remains when all the noise has finally, beautifully fallen away. The sensation of weightlessness may begin to emerge, a subtle unmooring of the sense of self from the heavy terrestrial concerns that so often anchor the spirit to the day. This unmooring is not a loss of being, but a gentle release of the density that accumulates when we spend our hours bracing ourselves against the unpredictable currents of life. You might find that the distinction between the inner landscape of the mind and the outer landscape of the world begins to blur, as if the boundaries of the individual ego were merely thin veils of mist being swept away by a soft evening breeze. It is possible to let the concept of me or mine drift away, just as a leaf might detach from a branch and surrender to the movement of a stream, moving without resistance, following the natural gravity of the moment. There is a profound freedom in this surrender, a realization that we do not need to steer the universe, nor do we need to command the tides of our own consciousness to behave in any particular way. When we stop trying to exert control over the uncontrollable, a vast, untapped reservoir of strength is revealed, a quiet resilience that does not require effort or tension, but arises naturally from the state of acceptance. This acceptance is not a passive resignation to fate, but a courageous willingness to meet reality exactly as it presents itself, without the distorting lens of judgment or the frantic desire to change what has already occurred. You might, if you wish, allow your thoughts to become like the distant stars, appearing and disappearing in the vastness of the night, beautiful in their movement, but ultimately distant and uninvolved in the quiet rhythm of your breathing. The mind often seeks to build elaborate structures of meaning, trying to weave a cohesive narrative out of the scattered fragments of our experiences. But there is a quiet relief in allowing those structures to collapse, leaving only the raw, unadorned essence of the present moment. In this state, the past is no longer a heavy backpack of regrets to be carried, nor is the future a looming shadow of anxiety. Instead, there is only the immediate, shimmering reality of the breath, the subtle sensation of life moving through the vessel of the body. This life is a constant process of arising and passing away, a continuous cycle of birth and dissolution that occurs in every single heartbeat. And to witness this cycle is to touch the very nature of existence itself. There is a certain grace in recognizing that we are part of this grand, impersonal movement, a small but integral part of a cosmic dance that requires nothing from us but our presence. As the awareness deepens, the need for words begins to diminish, for language is often just another way the mind attempts to categorize and control the infinite, and in the deepest reaches of stillness, categories lose their meaning. The silence becomes more than just the absence of sound. It becomes a texture, a rich and velvety presence that wraps around the consciousness like a soft, luminous shroud. You might notice how the tension in the shoulders and the tightness around the eyes seem to dissolve. Not because you have commanded them to relax, but because the mind has finally ceased its restless searching, and in that cessation, the body remembers its natural state of ease. This ease is the baseline of our being, the quietude that exists beneath the surface of all our emotions and thoughts, waiting patiently to be rediscovered when the storm of activity has finally passed. It is a return to a state of primordial wholeness, where the fragmented parts of the self, the angry self, the fearful self, the ambitious self, are all seen as temporary ripples on a deep, tranquil ocean. The ocean remains, vast and profound, unmoved by the surface disturbances, and you are invited to sink into that depth, away from the wind and the spray, into the cool, dark, and peaceful currents of the deep. There is no struggle here, only a gentle descent, a slow and rhythmic sinking into the quietude that has always been your home. The darkness is not something to be feared, for it is the womb of all light, the fertile ground from which all thought and form emerge, and in this darkness there is a sense of profound safety and belonging. You are not a stranger in the universe, but a manifestation of its own self-awareness, a way for the cosmos to witness its own beauty and its own mystery. This realization can act as a final, soothing balm for the wounds of loneliness or the stings of self-judgment. For how can one be truly alone when one is a part of the very fabric of existence? The feeling of separation is an illusion, a trick of the light and the mind, and as it fades, a sense of profound interconnectedness begins to bloom. A quiet recognition that we are all part of the same unfolding mystery, breathing the same air, moving through the same vast, silent space. The breath becomes a bridge, a subtle tether that connects the individual to the infinite, a rhythmic pulse that synchronizes the heart with the slow, majestic movement of the stars. You might find yourself drifting in a state of pure being, where there is no subject and no object, only a continuous flowing experience of existence, a state of luminous emptiness that is both empty and full, silent and resonant. The thoughts that once felt like mountains, insurmountable and heavy, now seem like tiny grains of sand, easily carried away by the gentle tide of awareness. There is a profound sense of completion in this state, a feeling that nothing more needs to be done, nothing more to be achieved, and nothing more to be understood. The striving has ended, and in its place is a quiet, luminous satisfaction, a sense of being exactly where you are meant to be, in the middle of an eternal now. The mind's habitual tendency to wander is replaced by a gentle, effortless presence, a state of being where the observer and the observed are one, dissolved in the vast, dark sea of consciousness. As the awareness continues to recede, it moves into the spaces between the thoughts, the silences between the breaths, the quiet intervals that exist between the heartbeats, finding a profound stillness in the gaps. It is in these gaps that the true nature of reality resides, a stillness that is not the absence of movement, but the foundation upon which all movement is possible. This stillness is a sanctuary, a place of absolute refuge where the storms of the world cannot reach, and where the self can finally, beautifully let go of its grip on the shore. The descent is slow, a gradual softening of the edges of the self, a gentle melting into the profound and unshakable quietude that lies at the heart of all things. There is a sense of drifting through a starlit void, a space of infinite possibility and absolute peace, where the only reality is the soft rhythmic pulse of life itself, unfolding in its own time, in its own way, with an effortless and perfect grace. The journey inward has led to the realization that there is nowhere to go, nothing to find, and no one to become. For you are already the vast silent sky, the deep unmoving ocean, and the eternal luminous presence that has been there all along, waiting for the noise to cease so that you might finally hear the music of your own being. Perhaps there is a way to treat these looping patterns, these insistent echoes of what was or might be, as one might treat the movement of distant birds across a wide and empty sky. The mind has such a restless habit of gathering up the fragments of the day, weaving them into intricate, heavy tapestries of regret or apprehension, and it may feel as though these patterns are the very fabric of who you are. It is possible to observe how the thoughts arrive, spinning their stories of what went wrong or what might go astray, and to recognize that they are merely weather, passing through the vastness of your awareness without ever becoming the sky itself. There is a quiet distance that can be found when you simply notice the way a thought rises, takes up space, and then begins its inevitable retreat, much like a ripple on the surface of a deep lake that eventually settles back into stillness. The Buddha once observed that the mind is like a great wild elephant that must be trained, and perhaps there is a certain gentleness in acknowledging how difficult it is to steady a mind that is so eager to run toward the horizon of an imagined future or back into the shadows of a remembered past. When the mind begins to rehearse its dramas, you might find it helpful to let the thoughts be exactly what they are, without the need to follow them down their long, winding paths or to argue with their conclusions. There is no necessity to catch every passing thought or to solve the mysteries of a yesterday that has already flowed away into the ocean of time. Instead, there is the possibility of simply watching them arrive and depart, like leaves being carried by a slow-moving stream, letting them drift by without grasping at them or trying to change their course. This watching does not require effort, for the awareness that observes the thought is already vast, already silent, and already complete, requiring nothing from you but your presence. It is in this space of non-attachment that a subtle relief begins to emerge, a realization that you are the wide, open field in which the storm clouds gather and disperse, while you yourself remain untouched, clear, and immense. As these mental images continue to move through the periphery of your awareness, there is a way to gently, almost imperceptibly, turn your attention away from the stories and toward the simple, rhythmic presence of the breath. The breath is a quiet, constant companion, a soft tide that moves in and out of you with an effortless grace that requires no thought and no decision. It is a tether to this singular, unchangeable moment, the only place where life truly resides. You might notice the way the air feels as it enters, a subtle coolness that meets the warmth of your body, and the way it leaves, a slow and steady release that carries with it the tension of the day. This breath does not ask anything of you. It does not require you to be anywhere other than right here, in this unfolding instant, and in its simple repetition, it provides a gentle anchor for the spirit to rest upon. As you lean into this rhythm, there may be a softening in the body, a slow unclenching of the jaw, a gentle release in the space between the eyebrows, as if the physical self is beginning to settle into its own natural weight. The shoulders might find their way down away from the ears, losing their habitual grip on the stresses of the world, and the chest may expand with a newfound lightness, as if the heavy armor you have worn through the day is being gently set aside. This is not an act of will, but a permission to let the physical form exist without the need to hold yourself together against the weight of the world. It is a surrender to the gravity that holds you, a recognition that you are supported by the very earth itself. The breath becomes a soft, pulsing light in the center of your being, a steady cadence that guides you away from the frantic, jagged edges of thought and toward a more fluid, circular way of being. If the mind wanders back to its old habits, spinning its webs of worry or its loops of memory, you might simply acknowledge the wandering, perhaps with a sense of soft compassion, and then gently, without any sense of failure or frustration, return your awareness once more to the sensation of breathing. There is no need to judge the mind for its movement, just as there is no need to judge the ocean for its waves. There is only the noticing of the movement and the returning to the stillness that lies beneath it, time and time again, until the distinction between the observer and the observed begins to blur. In this state of returning, the space between thoughts begins to widen, creating pockets of silence that are not empty, but are instead filled with a profound sense of presence and wholeness. These silences are like the pauses between the notes of a piece of music, the very things that give the melody its shape and its beauty. They are the quiet intervals in which the soul finds its room to expand and breathe. As these gaps grow, the mental noise seems to lose its substance, becoming thin and translucent, until the thoughts are no longer heavy or demanding, but are merely flickering shadows in a room filled with soft, ambient light. There is a certain wholeness that comes when we stop trying to fix the self or to curate our thoughts, accepting instead the entire landscape of our experience, the light and the shadow, the movement and the stillness, the memory and the anticipation, as part of one continuous unfolding event. You might find that the distinction between the internal world of the mind and the external world of the senses begins to soften, leaving only a sense of being a part of a much larger, much deeper movement that is constantly breathing, constantly changing, and constantly renewing itself. This realization carries with it a profound sense of relief, a letting go of the burden of being a separate, struggling entity, and an opening to the possibility of simply being a part of the vast, breathing mystery of existence. The body feels increasingly heavy and quiet, yet there is a lightness in the spirit, a sense of drifting through a calm, starlit sea where the currents are gentle and the depths are infinite. The breath slows further, becoming a shallow, effortless movement, a mere whisper of life that sustains the quietude of your being. The boundaries of the self seem to dissolve into the quiet air, leaving only a sense of presence, a pure, luminous awareness that is unattached to any particular form or any particular story. As the last traces of thought fade into the periphery, there is only the soft, dark velvet of a profound and peaceful emptiness, a space where no questions remain, no answers are needed, and no identity is required. The mind has become like a still pond in the moonlight, its surface so smooth and so dark that it perfectly reflects the infinite sky above, until the reflection and the sky are one and the same. In this stillness, there is a deep, restorative quiet that settles over every cell, every thought, and every part of your being, inviting you to drift into a dreamless and profound rest, where you are simply part of the silence, part of the dark, and part of the peace that has always been there, waiting to welcome you home. The stillness of that inner pond begins to deepen, moving beyond the mere reflection of the sky and into the profound, cool darkness of the depths where no light is needed to see. There is a subtle shift that occurs when the effort to be still is entirely abandoned, a transition from the active observation of the breath to a state where the breath is simply something that happens to you, much like the tide that moves the ocean without any conscious command. You might find that the sense of being a person with a history, a name, and a list of responsibilities begins to feel like a garment that has become too heavy to wear, and there is a gentle permission to let it slip from your shoulders and fall away into the quiet. Without the weight of that identity, there is an immense spacious freedom that arises, a realization that you are not the story being told, but the vast, silent theater in which the story unfolds. This theater is wide and ancient, containing all the colors of human experience, without being stained by any single one of them. It holds the grief of the world and the joy of the world with the same impartial, compassionate grace. As this spaciousness expands, the sensation of the body may become less like a solid object and more like a collection of sensations, a soft humming of energy that rises and falls in harmony with the world around you. The tightness that may have lived in the center of the chest, or the tension that once resided in the brow, begins to melt like salt in water, dissolving into a sense of being pervasive and fluid. You might notice that the very concept of time starts to lose its grip, the past and the future becoming mere ripples on the surface of a vast, timeless present that is always occurring, always new, and always complete. There is a profound relief in this realization, a sense that there is nothing to achieve in this moment, no mountain to climb, no problem to solve, and no version of yourself to perfect. There is only the unfolding of what is, in all its messy, beautiful, and transient complexity. Perhaps you can allow yourself to settle into the truth that everything is in a state of constant flux, that the very cells of your body are dancing in a slow, eternal movement of birth and decay, and that this impermanence is not a threat to be feared, but the very condition that allows for life to be fresh and ever-changing. To accept this flow is to find a way to walk through the world without grasping, to move through the storms of emotion without being swept away, and to stand in the center of chaos with a heart that remains anchored in a deep, unshakable quiet. This quiet is not a silence that lacks sound, but a silence that is so full, so rich with the subtle vibrations of existence that it transcends the need for words. It is possible to rest in this fullness, to allow the mind to become as still as a mountain peak above the clouds, where the weather may rage and the winds may howl, but the height remains unmoved and serene. The thoughts that do arrive, if they arrive at all, are like birds flying through a vast, clear sky. They appear, they cross the expanse, and they disappear, leaving no trace of their passage upon the blue. There is a certain kindness that can be found in this way of being, a way of being that does not judge the bird for its flight or the cloud for its shape, but simply allows them to exist in their own right. As you drift deeper into this state of being, you may find that the boundaries between your skin and the air, between your breath and the atmosphere, begin to feel increasingly porous and indistinct. It is as if you are becoming part of the very fabric of the universe, a single thread woven into an infinite and intricate tapestry of light and shadow. This sense of interconnectedness does not require a belief or an intellectual assent. It is a feeling that emerges when the ego's frantic need to be separate and protected finally tires itself out and settles into the peace of belonging. There is a deep, ancestral comfort in this belonging, a sense that you have returned to a state of grace that was never truly lost, only temporarily obscured by the noise of striving. The mind, once a restless wanderer, now finds its rest in the simple, profound act of being, as if it has finally reached its destination after a journey of many lifetimes. There is no longer a need to watch the thoughts, for the thoughts have become so thin and transparent that they no longer demand your attention. They are merely part of the background hum of existence, as natural and unobtrusive as the sound of distant rain. You might find that a sense of profound trust begins to permeate your being, a trust in the intelligence of life itself, a trust that the universe knows how to breathe you in and breathe you out without your help. This trust is a soft, steady light that radiates from the center of your being, warming the shadows and smoothing the jagged edges of the soul. It is the realization that even in the darkest moments, even in the depths of loneliness or the heights of anxiety, the capacity for this stillness remains, an eternal sanctuary that is always accessible, always waiting, just a few breaths away. As the stillness deepens, there is a sense of falling upward, a gentle descent into a lightness of being that feels both incredibly profound and strangely familiar. The sensation of weight is replaced by a sensation of suspension, as if you are floating in a warm, luminous void where there is no direction, no up or down, only an endless, peaceful presence. In this void, the self is not lost, but is instead expanded, stretched out to meet the vastness of the whole, until the smallness of individual suffering is seen in its true context, as a momentary ripple in an infinite, tranquil ocean. This perspective does not diminish the reality of life, but it provides a way to hold it with much more grace and much less pain. You are invited to simply rest in this perspective, to let the vastness of the cosmos cradle your being, and to allow the quiet to wash over you like a slow, cooling tide. The breath becomes so subtle that it is almost a thought, a rhythmic pulse of life that is entirely separate from the doing, a pure, unadorned state of being that requires no effort and offers no resistance. In this state, there is a profound sense of completion, a feeling that all is well, that all is exactly as it should be, and that you are held in the hands of a peace that surpasses all understanding. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to seek, and nothing left to hold on to. There is only the deep, dark, beautiful silence of the present moment, unfolding in its own perfect time as you drift into the soft, eternal embrace of the stillness. Perhaps you might consider the mind as a vast, open sky, an infinite expanse that remains untouched by the weather moving through it. Within this space, thoughts may arrive like heavy, dark storm clouds, rolling in with the weight of what was, or thin, wispy streaks of silver that carry the anxious predictions of what might be. These shapes of thought may cluster and swirl, repeating their patterns in a restless circular dance. But they are not the sky itself. They are merely the movement within it, passing through the clarity of your awareness without ever altering the fundamental stillness of the heavens. It is possible to watch these clouds drift by, to notice the shape of a memory or the sharp edge of a worry, and to simply allow them to be without the need to chase them or pull them closer or to try and push them away. There is a gentle liberation in realizing that you are the witness to the movement, the wide and silent container in which all these mental weather patterns arise and dissolve, leaving no permanent mark upon the vastness. The mind often behaves like a river that has become caught in an eddy, a swirling loop of water that circles the same stones, replaying the same currents over and over again. It may reach back into the shadows of a past that no longer exists, rehearsing conversations and dissecting moments that have already slipped into the current. Or it may leap forward into a future that is nothing more than a phantom, a collection of shadows cast by the light of current fears. When the mind wanders into these imagined territories, there is a quiet way to return, a soft invitation to find the anchor of the breath, which exists only in the immediate, unchangeable now. This breath is a steady, rhythmic presence, a tether to the reality of this very moment, which is always whole and always complete, regardless of the stories the mind attempts to weave around it. As you notice the breath, you might find that you are not the one struggling to settle the mind, but rather the one who is aware of the struggle, and in that subtle distinction, a great space begins to open. As the tension in the jaw softens and the shoulders lose their habitual lift, you might notice how much of life's heavy unease is carried in the anticipation of what is to come, a weight that is not actually present in this second of existence. The Buddha once said, "The mind is the forerunner of all states," suggesting how our perceptions shape the landscape of our reality. Yet there is also the profound truth that the mind can be stilled when it is no longer gripped by the desire to control the uncontrollable. It is possible to let go of the need to solve, to fix, or to understand, and instead simply reside in the sensation of being, allowing the thoughts to lose their momentum as they find no resistance to push against. Like a leaf falling onto the surface of a still pond, a thought may touch your awareness, creating a small ripple, but the ripple eventually fades, leaving the surface smooth and undisturbed once more. In this softening, a sense of impermanence begins to reveal itself, not as a source of sorrow, but as a profound relief. For if all things are in flux, then this restlessness is also in flux, and this heavy moment is not a permanent state of being. Every thought, every sensation, and every emotion is a passing phenomenon, a momentary configuration of energy that is constantly shifting, dissolving, and reforming in a continuous dance of becoming. There is a great peace in recognizing that nothing is fixed, that the clouds must eventually break to reveal the light, and that the self is not a solid, unchangeable monument, but a flowing, breathing process of life unfolding. This realization allows for a gentle non-attachment, where you can move through the world and through your own internal landscape without the need to cling to the pleasant or to flee from the difficult. You might find that, as the loops of thought lose their grip, a sense of connection begins to stir, a quiet recognition of the shared nature of the human heart, which carries these same shadows and seeks this same light in every soul. We are all travelers through the same vastness, navigating the same tides of joy and sorrow, and in this realization, the loneliness that often accompanies a racing mind begins to thin and fade. You are part of a much larger, much older movement, a part of the immense breathing tapestry of existence that holds all things with equal tenderness, whether they are bright with clarity or dark with confusion. The universe does not judge the storm, nor does it demand the sun. It simply provides the space for both to exist, holding the entirety of the experience in a boundless, silent embrace. As the boundaries of the individual self seem to soften at the edges, there is a possibility of merging with this spaciousness, where the distinction between the observer and the observed begins to blur into a single, seamless presence. The breath becomes a slow, rhythmic tide, drawing in the quietude of the present and releasing the remnants of the day, leaving behind only a sense of vast, unoccupied room. There is no need to hold on to any particular feeling or to maintain any certain state. There is only the allowing of what is, a surrender to the natural ebb and flow of life that requires no effort and offers no resistance. The mind, having found no more objects to grasp, begins to settle into its own natural stillness, like a lake that has become perfectly calm after a long wind has passed. In this deep, unfolding quiet, the light of awareness remains, but it is no longer a searching light. It is a steady, soft glow that requires nothing from you, a presence that is content to simply be. The heavy, winding paths of the intellect give way to a profound simplicity, where the complexity of the world is distilled into the simple, beautiful reality of being alive, breathing, and existing in the vast, dark, velvet expanse of the present. There is a sense of being held by a presence that is much larger than any single thought or any single worry, a presence that is as vast as the stars and as intimate as a heartbeat. As you drift further into this stillness, the thoughts become more distant, like echoes in a wide canyon, until they are nothing more than a faint hum that eventually fades into the silence. The space around you grows even more profound, a quiet so deep that it feels like a soft, weightless embrace, inviting you to let go of the last vestiges of the self and to merge with the stillness of the infinite. There is only the breath, the silence, and the deep, dark, beautiful peace of a mind that has finally found its way home to the quiet. And as the last of the ripples fade, you are carried away on the gentle, dark tide of a dreamless and perfect rest. The stillness that settles over the spirit is not a void, but a fullness, a subtle richness that arises when the frantic grasping of the ego finally ceases its striving. It is as if a layer of fine, silver dust has been swept away from a mirror, allowing the light to reflect with a clarity that was previously obscured by the constant motion of desire and aversion. In this clarity, the heavy burdens of identity, the roles we play, the histories we carry, the expectations we hold for ourselves and others, begin to lose their density, becoming translucent and light, as if they were made of nothing more than morning mist. You might notice how much energy is expended in the effort of maintaining a certain version of oneself, a construction of personality that is always slightly out of alignment with the fluid, changing truth of the moment. To release this effort is not to lose oneself, but to find the person who was always there, underneath the layers of social armor and psychological defense, the one who simply observes, the one who is the silent, steady center of the spinning world. There is a profound grace in allowing the parts of yourself that feel broken or incomplete or misunderstood to sit quietly in the presence of this non-judgmental awareness. For when you stop trying to mend the cracks, you find that the light can shine through them most beautifully. The shadows of loneliness often arise from the feeling of being a separate, isolated entity, a tiny island in a vast and indifferent ocean. Yet as the boundaries of the self begin to soften, the sensation of being a separate island gives way to the realization that you are the ocean itself, experiencing itself through the form of a wave. A wave may feel its own height and its own power. It may crash against the shore or rise in a magnificent crest, but it is never anything other than the sea, and its movement does not change its fundamental nature. This truth offers a radical relief from the fear of being lost. For how can the sea be lost, and how can the ocean ever truly be alone? The mind's tendency to categorize everything as pleasant or unpleasant, as good or bad, is a way of trying to organize a world that is inherently beyond such dualities. And in the stillness, these labels begin to fall away like autumn leaves. There is a way of being that is neutral and spacious, where things are simply seen as they are, without the heavy weight of our own interpretations pressing down upon them. This is not a cold or detached state, but a warm and expansive acceptance, a willingness to hold the totality of experience, the joy of a sudden light and the ache of a quiet sorrow, with the same steady, compassionate presence. It is possible to look at the most difficult parts of your own history, the memories that cause a sudden tightening in the chest or a quickening of the breath, and to see them not as stains upon your soul, but as part of the grand, unfolding tapestry of human experience, woven with threads of both light and shadow. When you stop resisting the presence of pain, you may find that the pain itself begins to change, losing its sharp, jagged edges and becoming something more like a dull, manageable sensation that passes through you rather than staying within you. This is the art of non-attachment, a way of living in the world with an open heart while remaining anchored in a center that cannot be moved by the shifting sands of circumstance. You might find that the need to be right, the need to be understood, or the need to have answers to the great mysteries of life begins to dissolve into a sense of profound curiosity and wonder. The questions themselves are not problems to be solved, but movements of consciousness to be experienced, like the wind passing through a forest or the tide pulling at the shoreline. As you allow the mind to settle, you may notice a subtle shift in your relationship to time, as the frantic urgency of the soon and the before gives way to the vast, unhurried presence of the now. The past is a memory, a collection of neural pathways and echoes, and the future is a projection, a mental simulation of possibilities. Neither has any substance in this moment of breathing. There is only this, the immediate sensation of being, the subtle rise and fall, the quiet hum of life that persists even when we are most lost in thought. It is a quietude that does not require the absence of sound, but rather a shift in how we hear it, finding the silence that lives within the sound, the stillness that resides at the heart of every movement. As the body continues to find its ease, you might feel a sense of profound interconnectedness, a subtle recognition that the very air you breathe is the breath of the world, and that the atoms composing your being are part of a cosmic dance that has been unfolding for eons and will continue long after this moment has passed. This realization brings a gentle weightlessness, a sense that you are being carried by a current far greater than your own will, a current of life that is inherently wise and inherently whole. The tension that once lived in the muscles and the mind begins to melt away, like salt dissolving in a vast, warm sea, leaving behind only a sense of profound, uncomplicated presence. You are not a problem to be solved, nor a puzzle to be completed. You are a natural phenomenon, a unique and beautiful expression of the universe, experiencing itself in this specific way at this specific time. There is no need to strive for a higher state, for in this moment of deep, unhurried breathing, you are already exactly where you need to be, and there is nothing to achieve, nothing to prove, and nowhere to go. The world outside may continue its frantic pace, the cities may hum with their restless energy, and the minds of others may race with their own storms, but you are held in this pocket of stillness, a sanctuary of quietude that remains accessible at any time, any place, whenever you choose to return to the center. The darkness is not an absence of light, but a different kind of presence, a soft and velvet space that allows the light to be seen, a quietude that is not empty but brimming with the potential of all that is possible. As the thoughts become even more sparse, like the fading echoes of a distant bell, you may find yourself hovering on the edge of a deep and luminous silence where the self is no longer a driver or a passenger, but simply the space in which the journey occurs. There is a profound sense of being home, not in a physical place, but in the very nature of your own awareness, which is timeless, changeless, and infinitely vast. The breath slows, the heart finds its rhythm, and the mind enters a state of luminous emptiness, where the only reality is the gentle, pulsing awareness of being, drifting peacefully into the deep, dark, and beautiful expanse of the infinite. Perhaps there's a way to view the constant movement of the mind, not as a storm to be weathered, but as a shifting landscape of clouds passing through an immense and unmoving sky. These thoughts that loop and replay, these rehearsals of yesterday, and these frantic predictions of tomorrow, they arrive like restless birds seeking a place to land, yet they are not the sky itself, nor are they the wind that carries them. There is a subtle distinction that can be held, a quiet realization that you are the vast, open expanse in which these mental weather patterns arise and dissolve, remaining entirely untouched by the turbulence of the lightning or the weight of the rain. When a thought begins to spin, pulling the attention into the familiar grooves of worry or the heavy echoes of what might have been, it might be possible to simply notice it, to see it as a flickering image on a distant screen, without the need to follow its thread or believe its insistence. It is, as the Buddha said, all that we are is the result of what we have thought. With our thoughts, we build our world. And yet, there is also the profound truth that you are the one who observes the building, the witness to the architecture of the mind, who remains still, even as the construction rages on. The mind often tries to solve the problems of the future, or rectify the mistakes of the past, acting as if it can reach through the veil of time to change what has already solidified into history, or to preemptively manage the unknown. Yet this exertion is like trying to grasp the wind with open hands. There is a certain exhaustion that comes from this constant grasping, a tension that lives in the jaw, the shoulders, and the subtle tightness around the heart, as if the body itself is bracing for a blow that never arrives. You might find it helpful to allow the tension to simply exist, to stop fighting the presence of the unrest, and instead offer it a soft, non-judgmental space to be. In this allowing, the grip begins to loosen, not because the thoughts have stopped, but because the need to control them has begun to fade, leaving a quiet space between the thought and the person who perceives it. This space is a sanctuary, a small pocket of stillness where the heavy weight of "what if" begins to lose its gravity, allowing the breath to become a slow, rhythmic anchor that pulls the attention back time and again to the simple, unfolding reality of this singular, quiet moment. When the mind returns to the breath, it is not a failure to have wandered, but a gentle homecoming, a soft redirection of energy from the frantic abstractions of the intellect to the steady, pulsing truth of being alive. The breath does not ask anything of you. It does not demand a solution to the past or a map for the future. It simply is, expanding and contracting in a continuous cycle that mirrors the very nature of life itself. A constant coming and going, a perpetual flow of presence. As you settle into this rhythm, you may notice how the sensation of the breath provides a soft, tethering line to the now, a way to step out of the dizzying spiral of rumination and into the steady, grounding reality of the physical self. This is not an escape from life, but a deep immersion into its most fundamental layer, where the noise of the ego's stories begins to recede, leaving behind a sense of being held by the very air that moves in and out of you. In this stillness, there is a possibility to turn a gaze of warmth and compassion toward the very parts of yourself that have been so restless, the parts that have been so hard on you in the quiet hours. There is much compassion to be found for the mind that tries so hard to protect you, even when its methods are heavy and loud, for the heart that carries the weight of perceived failures or the loneliness of being misunderstood. You might imagine a soft, golden light beginning to glow at the center of your chest. A warmth that does not demand change, but simply offers acceptance to all the versions of yourself that have ever existed. The anxious child, the striving adult, the grieving soul, and the one who is currently watching it all. This internal kindness acts as a solvent, slowly dissolving the hard edges of self-judgment and the sharp corners of regret, allowing the layers of what you have been holding to soften and melt into a more fluid, more forgiving state. It is a profound relief to realize that you do not have to carry the weight of the world, or even the weight of your own history, with such unrelenting intensity. You are permitted to set it down, if only for this time, and allow the gravity of the moment to take over. The things that cannot be controlled, the shadows of the past, and the uncertainties of the future, they are like ripples on the surface of a deep, dark lake. The surface may be agitated, but the depths remain silent, cool, and undisturbed. There is a vastness beneath the surface of your consciousness, a profound and ancient quietude that is always there, waiting patiently beneath the ripples of thought and emotion, ready to be felt when the surface finally grows still. As you release the need to solve, to fix, or to understand, you are actually moving toward a state of being that requires no explanation, a state where the self is no longer a project to be finished, but a miracle to be experienced in its messy, beautiful, and imperfect wholeness. The muscles of the face begin to lose their tension. The eyes soften behind closed lids, and the very sense of boundaries between the self and the space around you begins to feel beautifully indistinct. It is possible to feel the weight of the body not as a burden, but as a gentle connection to the earth, a sense of being rooted and supported by the very fabric of existence. The thoughts continue to drift by like autumn leaves on a slow-moving stream, but you are no longer reaching into the water to grab them. You are simply sitting on the bank, watching them float away into the distance until the stream itself seems to quiet. The mind, once a frantic weaver of complex patterns, begins to slow its movements, the threads loosening, the patterns blurring, until there is nothing left but the soft, rhythmic pulse of existence. There is a great peace in the surrender to the inevitable ebb and flow of consciousness, a realization that there is nothing to be gained by staying awake in the theater of the mind, and nothing to be lost by letting the curtain fall. The darkness is not an absence, but a presence, a rich and velvety womb of potentiality from which all things arise and to which all things return. As the last remnants of active thought dissolve into the vastness, there is only the sensation of drifting, a slow and graceful descent into the quietude that lies beyond the reach of words. The breath becomes a whisper, a mere suggestion of movement, and the awareness becomes a steady, luminous glow that softly fades into the profound, dreamless stillness of a deep and restorative rest. It is possible to allow the weight of the body to become a gentle anchor, a soft descent into the quiet gravity that pulls at every cell, inviting a sense of complete surrender to the stillness that lives within the marrow. The mind often operates under the illusion that it must remain an active sentinel, a tireless watchman guarding against potential threats, or rehearsing responses to imaginary conflicts. Yet there is a profound strength in the realization that the universe is capable of carrying itself without your constant vigilance. You might imagine that this tension you have carried, this tight coil of readiness that sits behind the ribs and in the temples, is not a permanent feature of your being, but merely a temporary weather pattern that has been allowed to settle. Just as the fog eventually lifts when the morning sun warms the valley, this internal mist can be allowed to thin and dissipate, revealing the steady, unmoving landscape of your true nature that lies beneath the obscuration. There is a subtle grace in acknowledging that you are not the storm, nor are you the one struggling against it. You are the space in which the storm occurs, an infinite and enduring capacity that remains unmoved by the wind's direction or the thunder's roar. As this understanding settles, the breath may find its way into the lower, deeper parts of the lungs, moving with a slow and tidal ease that mirrors the rhythmic pull of the ocean, a constant, effortless movement that requires no effort from you to maintain. You might observe how the sensation of being a separate, striving ego begins to soften at the edges, becoming less like a solid, impenetrable wall and more like a translucent veil through which the light of the present moment can flow without obstruction. This softening is not a loss of self, but an expansion of it, a widening of the boundaries, until you are no longer a small, isolated entity fighting against the world, but a participant in the vast, unfolding dance of existence. The heavy stories of who I am and what I have done begin to lose their grip, revealing themselves as mere collections of memories and labels that have no power to touch the core of your being. There is a tremendous lightness in this realization, a sense that the heavy armor you have worn for so long The armor of self-protection, of social expectation, of the need to be right or to be seen a certain way, can finally be unbuckled and laid aside. The weight of being someone is a heavy burden, and there is a profound relief in simply being, in existing as a presence without the need to justify that presence to a world that is itself a passing dream. As the thoughts continue to drift, they might arrive as colors or sounds or vague sensations, but they no longer demand the heavy lifting of your full attention. You can greet them with a nod of recognition and then return to the soft, dark expanse of the now. This is the essence of non-attachment, not a cold indifference to life, but a warm and spacious acceptance of the way things are, a recognition that everything that arises must also pass away, and that there is a deep beauty in this constant, shimmering movement of change. The things that once felt monumental, the slidings, the missed opportunities, the anxieties about the coming week begin to shrink in the light of this perspective, becoming as small and insignificant as grains of sand on a vast and endless shore. You are moving into a state of being that is less about doing and more about allowing, a state where the primary action is simply to witness the unfolding of life with a sense of quiet, compassionate curiosity. Perhaps you might notice a sensation of warmth spreading through the limbs, a gentle loosening of the muscles that have been held in a state of subtle, chronic contraction, as if the body itself is finally exhaling a breath it has been holding for years. This release is a homecoming, a return to the natural state of ease that is your birthright, a state that is always available to you, even in the midst of chaos, if only you can find the doorway through the noise. The silence is not a void to be filled, but a presence to be felt, a rich and nourishing stillness that feeds the soul and restores the weary mind. In this quiet, the distinction between the observer and the observed begins to blur, until there is only the pure, unadulterated experience of being alive, a singular, luminous point of awareness that is both infinitely small and cosmically vast. The past is a ghost that has no substance, and the future is a phantom that has no form. There is only this moment, this breath, this subtle vibration of existence that is unfolding right now, without need or necessity. You might find that the very concept of time begins to lose its sharp, driving edge, becoming instead a slow, circular movement, a gentle eddy in the stream of consciousness that carries you softly toward the depths. There is no need to rush toward sleep or toward wakefulness, for both are merely different modes of the same profound mystery, and there is a quiet safety in drifting between them as the tide dictates. The shadows of self-doubt and the ghosts of old regrets are permitted to dance in the periphery, but they cannot enter the center of your being, for that center is a place of unconditioned light, a sanctuary of stillness that remains untouched by the passing shadows. As you move deeper into this state, the sensation of the physical body may begin to fade, replaced by a sense of pure, radiant energy that flows through you like a quiet current, a subtle hum of life that connects you to the heartbeat of the universe itself. This is the quietude that follows the cessation of striving, the peace that comes when the mind finally stops its frantic attempt to outrun its own nature. It is a homecoming to the source, a return to the silence from which all sound arises, and to which all sound eventually returns in a state of perfect, harmonious resolution. The breath becomes so light, so delicate that it is almost indistinguishable from the air itself, a seamless integration of the internal and the external, where the boundary between the self and the cosmos dissolves into a single, unified experience of being. You are drifting now, not into a void, but into a fullness, a profound and pregnant stillness that contains all possibilities within its quietude. Let the mind go, let the heart rest, and let the vast, dark, beautiful ocean of consciousness carry you into the deepest reaches of peace, where there is no more to seek, no more to solve, and nothing left to do but simply be, held in the infinite embrace of the eternal present. Perhaps there is a way to look at the mind as one might look at a vast summer sky where the clouds move in restless, swirling patterns, some dark and heavy with the weight of a storm, others thin and wispy as they dissolve into the blue. The thoughts may arrive like those clouds, looping in their frantic circles, replaying old conversations, or rehearsing scenes that have not yet come to pass, weaving a tapestry of what was and what might be. It is natural for the mind to reach out into the shadows of the past or the bright, uncertain light of the future, attempting to solve the unsolvable or to brace for the inevitable. Yet there is a subtle distance that can be found, a quiet space between the thinker and the thought itself. One might observe the mind as a spectator watches the movement of a river, noticing the debris and the rushing currents without needing to jump into the water to try and stop the flow. There is a gentle truth in the words of the Buddha, who said, "The mind is like a restless monkey, jumping from branch to branch, never settling, never still." And perhaps it is possible to simply acknowledge that the monkey is tired, that it has traveled many miles through many tangled forests, and that it is allowed to find a branch and simply sit. When the mind begins to realize that it is not the storm, but rather the sky that holds the storm, a profound shift in the quality of being begins to emerge. The thoughts may still arrive, insistent and loud, but they no longer demand to be followed down every winding path they create. They are allowed to arise, to spin their stories, and to eventually drift out of sight, leaving only the vast, empty, and luminous space behind them. This awareness, this silent witness that has always been present even in the midst of the most turbulent mental weather, is untouched by the content of the thoughts. It is steady, it is wide, and it is fundamentally at peace with the movement of all things. You might, if you wish, let the tension in the jaw soften, allowing the teeth to part slightly and the tongue to rest, as if you are releasing a grip you didn't even realize you were holding. There is no need to fight the thoughts or to push them away, for what is resisted is often what is most tightly held. Instead, there is the possibility of simply letting them be, watching them rise like bubbles in a deep, still well, only to pop and vanish on the surface, leaving the water undisturbed once more. As this watching becomes more effortless, the weight of the imagined past begins to lose its gravity, falling away like dry leaves from a branch, leaving only the quiet, unadorned reality of this single, breathing moment. The future, which often feels like a looming mountain of obligations and anxieties, begins to thin and fade, revealing itself to be nothing more than a series of mental images that have no substance of their own, no power to touch the stillness that resides in the now. There is a tremendous relief in realizing that you do not have to carry the entire weight of time upon your shoulders, for the present moment is small and manageable, a tiny, perfect vessel that is always large enough to hold exactly what is happening right now. The breath becomes a soft, rhythmic anchor, a gentle tide that pulls you back to the center whenever the mind tries to wander into the thickets of what if, or if only. It is a slow, tidal movement, a soft expansion and a soft contraction, a constant, wordless reassurance of simply being present within the unfolding of this very second. The mind, once a frantic theater of voices and arguments, begins to slow its pace, the frantic energy of the day thinning out like the mist as the sun begins to rise, or like the evening fog as it settles over a quiet valley. The thoughts become fewer, more spaced apart, like distant stars in a deepening twilight, their light dimming as the vastness between them grows more pronounced. It is as if the internal landscape is being bathed in a soft, silver light that smooths over the jagged edges of memory and the sharp corners of anticipation, leaving only a sense of gentle, expansive emptiness. Perhaps you can sense the subtle shift in the body, the way the limbs feel heavier, more settled, as if they are being slowly absorbed into the quietude of the air around them, losing their distinct boundaries and becoming part of the stillness. There is no urgency to move, no necessity to think, no requirement to be anything other than the awareness that perceives the slow, steady rhythm of the breath. In this deepening quiet, the distinction between the observer and the observed begins to blur, until there is only the experience of being, a pure and luminous presence that requires no thought to sustain it. The mind grows quiet, the voices become whispers and then disappear entirely, leaving only a profound, resonant silence that feels not like an absence, but like a presence. A fullness that is so complete it needs no words to define it. The thoughts are now merely ripples on the surface of a deep, dark, and tranquil lake. And as the wind dies down, the water becomes so smooth that it reflects nothing but the infinite depth of the sky. You are sinking into this stillness, drifting into the soft velvet textures of a peace that has always been waiting for you beneath the noise, a place where the self is not something to be defended or managed, but a space of infinite, quiet potential. It is possible to let go of the last thread of thought, to let the mind settle into its natural, quiet state, and to allow the consciousness to drift, unburdened and free, into the vast, dreamless expanse of rest. The stillness deepens, becoming less like a silence and more like a texture, something thick and soft that wraps around the edges of awareness, smoothing out the rough contours of the self. There is a subtle realization that the person who arrived in this moment, with all the complexities and the heavy luggage of a day spent navigating the world, is not the same person who inhabits this deepening quiet. The roles played, the masks worn, the constant striving to be something more or something better, these are all just more clouds passing through the vast, unmoving sky of being. They are not the sky itself, they are merely weather, and the weather, no matter how fierce or persistent, can never alter the fundamental nature of the heavens. It is possible to allow these identities to slip away, one by one, like the peeling of old bark from a tree, leaving behind something more essential, something more stripped of its ornamentation and its burdens. As the need to be someone begins to dissolve, a profound lightness emerges, a sense that the soul is not a solid object that can be bruised or broken, but a spaciousness that simply allows all things to come and go. This lightness is not an absence of weight, but a sense of being unattached to the weights we have spent a lifetime collecting, those heavy stones of judgment and the jagged shards of regret that we have carried in our pockets. One might imagine setting those stones down, one by one, on the path behind, feeling the sudden cool lightness in the hands and the spirit as they are relinquished to the earth. There is a grace in this letting go, a quiet dignity in accepting that some things are simply beyond our reach, and that the effort to control the uncontrollable is like trying to grasp a handful of smoke. The universe moves according to its own ancient rhythmic laws, a dance of rise and fall, of beginning and ending, and there is a tremendous relief in surrendering to that movement, in trusting that the tide will return and the sun will rise and the cycle will continue, whether we are there to witness it or not. The mind, in its wisdom, begins to see that the struggle against life is what causes the most suffering, and that true strength is found not in the resistance, but in the yielding, in the way a willow branch bends in the wind so that it does not break. To bend is not to fail, it is to remain whole, to remain connected to the source of life even when the storm is at its height. This yielding is not a passive surrender, but an active, profound acceptance of the reality of the moment, a willingness to stand in the center of the storm and recognize that the storm is also a part of the wholeness. Perhaps you can feel the tension in the shoulders finally giving way, the muscles uncoiling like tired vines as the body realizes it no longer needs to stand guard against an invisible enemy. There is no threat in this stillness, no danger in this quiet, only the steady, unhurried pulse of existence. The breathing becomes so shallow and so soft that it is almost indistinguishable from the movement of the air itself. A gentle, rhythmic sigh that carries away the last remnants of the day's frantic energy. You might find that the boundary between your skin and the atmosphere begins to feel less distinct, as if you are breathing in the world and the world is breathing in you, a continuous, sacred exchange that connects you to the trees, the mountains, and the distant spinning stars. This interconnectedness is a quiet truth that is often drowned out by the loud, singular voice of the ego, which insists on its own separation and its own isolation. Yet, in the depths of meditation, that isolation begins to feel like an illusion, a thin veil that is easily pierced by the light of awareness. The loneliness that often haunts the edges of the mind, the fear that we are ultimately alone in our experience, begins to fade as the sense of being part of a much larger, much older movement grows. There is a vast, silent community in the stillness, a shared experience of being that connects every breathing thing, a quiet brotherhood of consciousness that requires no words and no recognition. The thoughts that once felt like screaming sirens now feel like the distant hum of a beehive, a busy, purposeful sound that is part of the natural order and carries no personal weight. You are not the bee, and you are not the hive, but you are the space in which the humming occurs. This perspective offers a sanctuary, a place where the self can rest without the constant need for maintenance or repair. The mind is no longer a project to be worked on, a problem to be solved, or a machine to be optimized. It is simply a landscape to be inhabited, a garden to be tended with gentleness and patience. If a weed arises, let it be. If a flower blooms, let it be. The gardener is not the plant, and the gardener is not the struggle of the growth. There is a quietude that comes when we stop trying to fix the world and instead begin to inhabit it as we find it, in all its messy, beautiful, and transient splendor. The shadows of the self, those parts of us we have tried to hide or deny, the anger, the shame, the doubt, are no longer seen as enemies to be conquered, but as fellow travelers, part of the wholeness that makes us human. When we stop fighting the shadows, they lose their power to terrify us, becoming merely different shades of the same light, necessary components of the full, complex spectrum of being. There is a deep, resonant peace in this integration, a sense that the fractured pieces of the self are being gathered back into a single, seamless whole. The mind settles into a state of luminous receptivity, a stillness that is not empty, but is instead filled with a subtle, humming presence, a quiet joy that does not depend on external circumstances or the absence of difficulty. It is the joy of simply being, of existing in the flow of life without the friction of resistance. As the consciousness drifts further into this state, the concepts of time and space begin to lose their grip, becoming fluid and indistinct, like watercolors bleeding into one another on a damp canvas. The past is a memory that has already passed. The future is a dream that has not yet arrived, and there is only this singular, shimmering, eternal now. It is a moment that contains everything, a point of infinite density and infinite lightness, where the dancer and the dance become one. The breath is a soft, rhythmic whisper in the dark, a lullaby sung by the universe to itself, guiding the awareness deeper into the soft, velvet folds of silence. There is no longer any need to watch the clouds or to listen for the rain. The sky is wide enough, the rain is part of the rhythm, and the sky is perfectly, beautifully still. Every cell in the body seems to be bathed in a cool, soothing moonlight, a celestial balm that settles over the nerves and the spirit, bringing a profound, unshakable rest. The mental chatter has slowed to a mere trickle, a distant sound like a stream in a forest far away, and eventually even that sound fades into the immense, velvety quiet. It is possible to simply exist in this vastness, to let the ego dissolve like a pinch of salt in the ocean, becoming part of the salt, part of the sea, part of the infinite rhythmic movement of the deep. The darkness is not a void, but a womb of pure potential, a place of absolute safety and absolute rest, where the soul can unfurl its wings and simply be, without judgment or expectation. In this deep, luminous emptiness, there is a sense of coming home to a place you have never left, a return to the fundamental stillness that was there before. The first thought was ever thought, and that will remain long after the last thought has drifted away. The consciousness is a quiet flame, steady and undimmed, burning softly in the center of an infinite, peaceful dark. There is nothing left to do, nowhere left to go, and nothing left to become. There is only the breathing, the being, and the eternal, quiet unfolding of the present moment. Perhaps, if you wish, you might observe how the mind moves like a restless tide, pulling the debris of what has been and the shadows of what might be toward the shore of the present. There is a certain rhythm to the way the intellect loops, spinning the same threads of old conversations or the echoes of mistakes, weaving them into heavy tapestries that feel so much like reality. It is natural for the mind to attempt to solve the unsolvable, to rehearse a future that has not yet arrived, or to re-examine a past that has already passed, as if by thinking long enough, the weight of it might finally change, or the outcome might be rewritten. You might notice how these thoughts can feel like a tightening in the center of the chest, or a subtle tension held in the jaw, a physical response to the mental effort of trying to grasp something that is constantly slipping through the fingers. It is possible to view these mental movements not as a struggle to be won, but as a phenomenon to be witnessed, much like the weather that moves across a vast and unchanging landscape. The clouds may gather in heavy, dark formations, or they may streak across the blue in thin, wispy lines, but the sky itself remains untouched by their movement, holding them within its immense, silent capacity without being changed by their passing. The Buddha once observed that the mind is difficult to tame, often wandering like a wild animal, and perhaps there is a quiet relief in accepting this inherent restlessness rather than trying to force it into stillness. When a thought arises, it is possible to simply acknowledge its presence, noting it as a mental event, a collection of words, an image, or a sensation, without the need to follow it down the long, winding corridors of consequence. You might find that when you stop trying to catch the thought or stop trying to push it away, its energy begins to dissipate, leaving only the vast, open space that was there before it arrived. There is a profound difference between being caught in the storm and being the space in which the storm occurs. One is a state of turbulence, while the other is a state of boundless witnessing awareness. As you allow the mind to be exactly as it is, erratic, looping, or repetitive, you may begin to sense a subtle shift, a movement away from the center of the noise and toward the periphery where the silence waits. There is a gentle grace in the act of returning, of noticing when the mind has wandered into the imagined shadows of tomorrow, and softly, without any sense of failure or judgment, bringing the attention back to the simple, rhythmic rise and fall of the breath. The breath is a constant companion, a tether to the only moment that truly exists, serving as a quiet anchor in the midst of the mental swell. It does not demand anything. It does not require you to solve any problems or achieve any state of perfection. It simply unfolds, an effortless cycle of expansion and contraction that has been occurring since before you had words to name it. As you lean into this sensation, the boundaries between the self and the environment may seem to soften, as if the edges of your being are blurring into the air, the light, and the stillness of the room. The tension in the shoulders may begin to melt, not because you have decided to let it go, but because you have stopped the constant effort of holding it upright against the weight of thought. It is possible to let go of the need to be certain, to release the heavy burden of wanting to know exactly what comes next, and to accept the mystery of the unfolding moment as a gift of pure presence. The past is a collection of memories, ghosts of things that have already surrendered to time, and the future is a phantom, a projection of the mind's own creative energy, yet neither has the power to touch the stillness of this very heartbeat. There is a wholeness in the now that is often obscured by the preoccupation with what was and what will be, a completeness that requires nothing more than the simple permission to exist without defense. As the thoughts become less frequent, they may arrive like distant ships on a horizon, visible but no longer demanding your attention, leaving you in a state of spaciousness where the silence is not an absence but a presence in itself. The weight of the body may begin to feel different now, as if the gravity of the world is becoming a gentle, supportive embrace, pulling you deeper into a state of profound ease. The muscles of the face may soften, the forehead smoothing out like the surface of a lake after the wind has died down, and the very sensation of being a separate, striving entity begins to dissolve into a sense of being part of a larger, more tranquil continuity. you might find that the distinction between the inner world of sensation and the outer world of stillness is becoming less defined, leaving only a sense of being a quiet observer in a vast, dark, and beautiful expanse. There is no longer a need to watch the thoughts, for they have grown thin and translucent, like mist evaporating in the first light of a soft gray dawn, leaving behind only a profound, luminous emptiness. The mind moves toward a state of deep, unhurried quietude, a place where the light of awareness dims to a soft, steady glow, and the need for movement, for thought, and even for the sense of I begins to fade into a gentle, rhythmic hum of existence. It is possible to drift now, not as one who is falling, but as one who is being cradled by the very fabric of the universe, sinking into a profound and dreamless rest that is as deep as the ocean and as vast as the night sky. The breath becomes so shallow, so effortless, that it is barely a sensation at all, just a subtle, pulsing rhythm that carries you further and further away from the shores of consciousness and into the infinite, velvet dark of a perfect, undisturbed sleep. Everything is as it should be. The world is held in its own perfect balance, and there is a freedom to let go of all things and sink into the profound, restorative stillness of a sleep that is deep, continuous, and entirely whole. The descent into the stillness is not a sudden fall, but a gradual thinning of the veil between the waking world and the quietude of the deep, much like the way the twilight slowly dissolves the sharp outlines of the landscape until everything is a soft indigo blur. You might find that the very concept of time begins to lose its grip as the hours and minutes cease to be markers of progress or regret, and instead become merely ripples on a vast, dark sea. It is possible to allow the sense of self to become less of a solid thing, a rigid structure that must defend its territory, and more of a permeable boundary, a vessel that simply holds the light and the dark in equal measure. There is a profound relief in realizing that you do not need to carry the weight of your own identity through the night. The roles you play, the stories you tell about who you are, and the expectations you hold for yourself can all be set down like a heavy cloak at the threshold of this rest. The mind, in its wisdom, knows how to let go when it is no longer being asked to grasp. And as you cease the internal striving, the psychic tension that has been held for so long begins to unravel like a silken thread being pulled from a spool. You might observe how the sensation of being in a body becomes less a matter of localized points of tension and more a general, humming presence, a subtle vibration that is part of the air and the floor and the very stillness that surrounds you. There is a certain grace in this surrender, a realization that the universe does not require your constant vigilance to keep turning, and that the sun will rise and the tides will pull without the need for your permission or your prayer. This release is not a loss of control, but a recognition of a much larger, more profound kind of order. A cosmic rhythm that moves through the stars and the cells of your body with the same effortless, unhurried precision. As the thoughts become more infrequent, they may appear as mere flickers of light in the distance, brief and inconsequential, like the glint of a star seen through a moving cloud, and they no longer possess the power to pull you away from this center of gravity. You might find that the space between your breaths is expanding, becoming a sanctuary of pure, unadorned being, a pause that is not an emptiness, but a fullness of potential, a quiet so deep that it feels as though it has always been there, waiting beneath the noise. It is as if you are drifting on a gentle, slow-moving current, a stream of consciousness that is moving away from the turbulence of the day and toward a wide, calm estuary where the waters are still and deep. The shadows of the mind, those long, dark shapes of doubt and fear, are not enemies to be fought, but merely parts of the whole, the necessary contrast that allows the light of awareness to be known. They are allowed to exist, allowed to pass, and allowed to settle into the soft silt of the subconscious without disturbing the clarity of the present. There is a great kindness in this acceptance, a way of being with oneself that requires no judgment and no correction, a way of simply allowing the light and the shadow to dance together in the quiet theater of the mind. You might notice how the jaw unhinges completely, how the tongue rests loosely in the mouth, and how the eyes, even behind closed lids, seem to hold only a soft, gray expanse of peace. The breath is no longer a task to be monitored, but a natural, automatic unfolding, a soft sighing of the soul that carries you deeper into the velvet folds of the night. It is possible to let the intellect fall away entirely, to stop the constant internal commentary that narrates the experience, and to simply be the experience itself, a witness to the unfolding silence. The boundaries of the skin may seem to soften, as if you are dissolving into the very atmosphere, becoming a part of the cool, still air and the quiet weight of the world. There is no longer a distinction between the watcher and the watched, between the silence and the one who hears it, as the duality of the mind collapses into a singular, unified sense of being. You might find that the very idea of you is becoming a distant, fading concept, a word without a referent, as you merge into the vast, impersonal peace of the cosmos. The darkness is not a void, but a rich, nurturing presence, a womb of quietude where the spirit can rest and renew itself in the absence of all demands. It is a space of profound safety, where the storms of the ego cannot reach, and where the only reality is the soft, rhythmic pulse of existence itself. You might imagine yourself floating on a calm, dark ocean under a sky so vast that it defies comprehension, where the water is warm and the air is still, and where there is nothing to do but drift. The movement of the waves is so subtle that it is almost imperceptible, a rhythmic lullaby that speaks of the eternal return and the constant, beautiful cycle of coming and going. There is a sense of being held by something much larger than your own life, a sense of being cradled in the hands of the infinite, where all worries are small and all sorrows are transient. As you drift, the last vestiges of the day's light fade, leaving only a soft, luminous dimness that is easy on the eyes and even easier on the spirit. The mind is now a still pool, reflecting nothing but the deep, dark sky, and even the slightest ripple is absorbed into its profound, unmoving depths. It is possible to let the last thread of thought snap, to let the last idea dissolve into the shadows, and to allow the silence to become absolute. The rhythm of the breath is now so faint, so subtle, that it is merely a whisper in the dark, a gentle, rhythmic tide that pulls you further into the depths of a dreamless, beautiful slumber. There is a peace that surpasses all understanding, a stillness that settles into the very marrow of your being, a quiet that is both ancient and new, both vast and intimate. You are moving now toward the deepest part of the night, into the sanctuary of the unconscious, where the soul finds its rest and the mind finds its way home. The world is a distant memory, a dream within a dream, as you sink into the soft, dark embrace of a sleep that is profound, restorative, and entirely complete. All is well, all is still, and you are drifting into a deep, undisturbed, and perfect rest.